Hello again. This is Mindu Chen. In this part 3 of Mastering Python Programming with ChatGPT, I'm going to show you how to do the following things. Using ChatGPT to help you to generate a data set, because programming is all about data and algorithm, and so you need data to play with. Having ChatGPT to create a small sample data set can help you to understand how everything works. And then we will learn how to manipulate the data. And all of the data generated initially will be stored in your main memory. But if you want to keep it externally for future use after you finish your program, then you need to save it to an external file or database. In this case, we're going to save it into Excel. And in data analytic, visualizing the data is very important. So we're going to use MatplotLib library in Python to plot the data set to help us to understand. And then we're going to ask ChatGPT to create an assignment based on what we have learned. And we'll come back actually ask ChatGPT to solve the assignment if somehow you're stuck in terms of solving the assignment created by ChatGPT. So let's get started. I have created a learning journal documenting all the prompts and the response from ChatGPT for this video lectures. I save it as a PDF file on GitHub, and I'll provide a link in the description section of this YouTube video. And let me just show you a little bit in terms of the format. So this is our lectures in terms of what we try to do. And the format is that I have specified the type of task or question that you ask ChatGPT will do for you. And the MI is basically just my abbreviated username, and followed by the prompt that I submitted to ChatGPT. And the response is copied and pasted here. Whenever ChatGPT generates the code, I use this website to highlight the code so it will be more colorful and easy to read. Let me just show you a few examples. So this is a data set generated by ChatGPT, and this is the code, which is color-coded with that website. In this particular program generated, they actually save the generated data in an Excel file. So this is a snapshot of the Excel file. Whenever I have notes, which means this is my notes, not generated from ChatGPT. And we are also going to show actually how to do charting or graphics, computer graphic. This is the one that has been generated with the code suggested by ChatGPT based on my instruction. Okay, so this is actually just copy and paste from my Jupyter notebook that generate this graph. And I also mentioned that this is important, that when you ask ChatGPT to do certain thing, it depends on how you ask the question. You may want to know why they're doing certain things. So in this case, I asked ChatGPT, say, choose the best chart type and tell me why you choose it. And this involved really high-level thinking. I think it's really, really critical that you try to learn and interact with ChatGPT in this way, such that you can learn more, not just getting something basic from it. Okay, so find the link, get this PDF, but the learning journal that I created, everyone should have their own because learning is a very personalized thing. And you may have certain things that you're not clear, and then you can ask ChatGPT. For some other people, that's not an issue. So create your own personalized learning journal, and if you wish, and share with others through this video or contact me. Thank you. Come here, since some ChatGPT have been very popular, so sometimes they're very slow in response time or not even working. So I'm going to show you what I have done. Am I here? It's me. That's my instruction. This is not in the form of question. This is actually an instruction. And let's just create a dataset content that contains students' midterm, final, and project score. So there's 3 numbers for each student, and the score can be from 0 to 100. So I specify a range. And I also say I have 5 students in the class, which is Mary, John, Bill, Julie, I meant to say Julie, and Paul. The weight for the midterm, final, and the project weight are the following. So that's the weight for. So they generate actually a pretty decent table of student name over here, and then the midterm, final, and project score. I guess Mary is not really fully participating in this course. That may not make a lot of sense, because Mary got 100 in the final but didn't do midterm and project. We can fix that, by the way. So they also laid out the weight clearly. So technically we can give this to the student and ask them to work on this assignment. They also actually show how you should calculate the final grade. I didn't even ask ChatGPT to do this, but they kind of figure out that you get 3 numbers, you have the weight for this 3 numbers, and they kind of figure out you want to calculate the final score based on the final grade, or based on the midterm, final, and project. So they actually even show you the formula. That's more than what I'm asking for. If you want to see how this is done, then you basically just say create the Python program to calculate students' final score. And by the way, you don't really need to write something very formal with perfect grammar that you make mistake often, and then they pretty much can figure out what you really want to do. So here, they basically created the program, okay, with some comment. Let me just copy the code. Let's come here. I do have my Jupyter notebook kind of open, and so let's open it up. So basically they use a list of dictionary to store the students' information. So for instance, not even sure whether they use dictionary or not. Let's say explain for me. Okay. So yeah, it's a list of dictionaries, which are elements in the list represent a student, and each dictionary contains the property of a student, including the name, midterm, final, and project. The student, which is a list, contains 5 elements, etc. So you can kind of read this, particularly when you're not really familiar with some of the concept in like dictionary and list, which are the building data structure, a little bit more complicated data structure than the traditional simple variable like integer, floating point, or string. So, but I mean, in this lecture, we're not explaining some of the advanced concept, but this is how you can kind of step by step and keep kind of asking and bugging ChatGPT to explain things for you. So this is basically, we have we give Mary is one of the students with the name, the midterm is 0, the final is 100, and project is 0. So this is actually a dictionary, contain several pair of variable and value. This is the variable and this is value. I'll explain a few things along the way, and so once we get into dictionary, unless you'll be a little bit more familiar with it and feel comfortable with it. So don't worry too much about some of the detail if you're not familiar with Python language that much yet. So we basically have one list item, two list item, etc. We have this list item, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Each one of them is actually has name, midterm, final, and project has 4 key, which is column name, whatever you want to call it. In dictionary, we call it key and value. Okay. And then we have the weight. Then we go through basically just the loop, because student is a list of students. So we use the for loop and fetch each of the student in it. And then, since it's a dictionary, we can actually get the midterm score and multiply by the midterm's weight, which has been defined before the loop. Okay, this you just have to do it once outside the loop. Then you can use it in the loop. Okay, and then we will calculate. So that would be the midterm score. I guess we should call it a weighted midterm score, and this will be a weighted final exam score. This will be weighted project score because we multiply the weight. Then we add it all up. That will be the final grade up to 100 points. In this case, we even add a new entry into the student dictionary data structure with the key called final grade, and store the newly calculated final grade to it. Okay. And eventually we can certainly print this out. Okay, we can print in this loop. So we will print out the student's name and the final grade that we just calculated. By the way, this is a format string. So in the format, we can have some string literal like this, but we can also have variable, okay, the variable name that we can use. Okay. So this is a variable name, actually. It's getting the value of the name in the student dictionary data structures. Let's copy this. The best way to copy your code is actually come here and just say copy code. And so I'll just do this. So this in Python notebook, I would just run it. And basically they're doing a great job in giving this. Okay. One thing you may want to do, because if you want to be a little bit familiar with the data structure, a lot of time I would just say print lowercase, sometimes I type uppercase. You can print this complex data structure. Okay, I say print student. So this is actually internally how the data has been stored. So we have Mary, midterm, final, project, and now we have another pair, which is the final that has been stored. But all of this is stored internally in your program. When you run it, and when you're done with your program, it's all gone. In this case, I'm printed it out so you can see it. So let's see how we can continue our conversation with ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT actually tried to explain the code it's generated, so that's pretty good. Now I ask ChatGPT and say generate the test data set and store it in an Excel file. I didn't even say Python program, but they use Python because earlier in our conversation we we use Python, so they kind of know our intention. Okay, ChatGPT is very good in figuring out your intention. Sometimes they may get it wrong, but most of the time they're pretty good at it. So here, the Python program has been generated. Okay, let's just go over the code just a little bit. We do need to use a random number generator to generate the data. So it's kind of randomized data set. That's very common in data analytics. We do need to use something called Pandas, which is kind of Python's implementation of Excel-like data structure. Okay, so that's the common way we import the library, and we will have a variable. We can use the Panda, just use abbreviation called PD instead of say Panda, so we can save a little bit typing. The comment and say I want to create, I believe, a student, which is empty list, and then there's a loop. We're going through this loop from 0 to 5. But 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're not going to do 5, but that's 5 times going through the loop. So every time we will actually create the name for the student. In this case, I think they're just giving the student a number, okay? And then they do use the random number generator to generate a random integer in the range of 0 to 100. For midterm, for final, for project, okay? And then we're going to add that newly generated student data to the student list. Initially, it's empty, but then we can keep adding to it. And then this is, to some extent, this is sufficient. This is done. So they still go through the whole things. If you only want the raw data without the final score, then you can stop pretty much right here in terms of the generation of the data set. However, if you want to calculate the final grade or final score, this is what we have just done. So that's included here. Then the beauty here, if let's say if you use the Pandas library, you can just say Panda data frame, which is a method. So Panda will create a data frame, convert the list that you have into a variable which has a data frame data type, which is a very complex data structure. And once you have that, then you can actually tell that data frame to convert this or save this to Excel. And that's the file name. Then the student.xlsx file will be saved in your current working directory where you run your program. And they print out the messages, tell the user this has been done. And it's always, for interactive program, it's always a good idea. If you have done a lot of things, just show some indication in printing or on the screen to tell the user what has been done. Otherwise, they may wonder what happened. They may click the button again and again and ended up doing things more than once. Copy that. So I'll come here, I'll paste my code, and that's pretty much it. So let's run it. This data has been written to the file. I do have it in my folder. Okay, this is my current directory where I have my create assignment Jupyter notebook, and okay. Actually, I believe this is the file that's just been generated. So if you look at here, this is the data has been generated. So instead of the name, because I didn't actually tell in my instruction the name of the student, so they kind of randomly generated Actually, they systematically generate a student name, just call it student 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can go back to the code to look at what has been done. And in Panda, by default, they have something called index. Index can be by number. It can be actually a label, which is string, but in this case, by default, it's number from 0 and on. So here they just say, yeah, the first row is 0, and which has student's name. So here's name and midterm, final, project, and final grade. So that's pretty cool. That's what we have. Okay, so that has been done. So we can examine that, and then let's come back. So, but I'm not happy with the randomly generated student's name. And by the way, if you look at after the generated code, they kind of try to explain what has been done. So that's a really, really good way to learn programming. If your Panda library is not installed, they even tell you that you need to do this pin install Panda. However, if you use Anaconda installation, some of the popular library like Panda has already been installed, so you don't have to go through this process. Here I'm complaining. I say, well, the name for the 5 students are Mary, John, Bill, July, and Paul. And also, my students are pretty good. So, in our experience, the mean of the score should be 80. Let's use 10 as a standard deviation. That's basic statistic, by the way. And the score should be also just 0 and 100. Because if you ask a function, a random number function to generate a normalized data, in some extreme case, it could be over 100 points, but you can only give student 100 points. So I want to also give this restriction, just in case there's a really extreme outlier, okay? So then Panda actually come back and do this. Instead of, they bring in a new library called Numpy, which is number in Python. Array, basically it's an array, multi-dimensional array, which we will learn down the road. And so they basically just say it's a normal distribution. The mean is 80, the standard deviation is 10, and generate 5 number, okay? This magic number 5 here just means the midterm score now is actually a 5 score stored here. Okay, they're not just generating one number. It's kind of array processing. We actually create an array with 5 number. We can look at it later when we run the program. Okay, that would be very interesting. Same thing, we generate 5 score, we generate 5 project score through this NumPy's random method and using the normal distribution random number generator. Okay, so in this case, we are going to still create a list, okay, for students. And for student, when you go through this, the first student will have the index of 0, okay. And then we have their name. And by the way, this is the student's name. Okay. Remember, I want the student with name, just not a pseudo student 1, student 2. So basically, first time you go through, they're going to assign Mary to the first student element in the list. And also for the midterm, final, and project score, remember I say, well, it has to be in their range. So they write something like this, which we will explain later, okay? Basically, just ensure it is within the minima is 0 and the maxima is 100, okay? If somehow it's below 0 or over 100, we're going to consider it's 100 on one end and 0 on the other end. Okay, so we do that for both midterm, final, and the project. Okay, then we'll add it to the student. So basically, now we have data structure contain all the information about the student. I believe it's a list of those students in the dictionary, and this is the way. So they will go through the sand drill, and we're creating the final grade, and we're storing in that dictionary. We're adding another pair of item, which is the final grade and the final grade that has been calculated. The final grade here is in dictionary, we call it key, and this is the value. Okay, so now the student have their name, midterm, final, and project score, as well as the final score. Now we convert that into a data frame. Okay, the reason we need to do this conversion is that Panda has a powerful method or function which, if you store data as a data frame, they can actually export that into Excel in a single line of code. Okay, so that's very convenient. Otherwise, if you try to figure out how to do it yourself, it would be just too much trouble. So here they're kind of explaining this for us. Okay, let's look at here. Yeah, I have a little bit of trouble when I first see this. Remember, in short, the score generated is between 0 and 100. So I say, just explain it to me. And by the way, ChatGPT knows Python very well and can do a lot of things for you. Explaining code is one of them. They do use comments sometimes to explain things simply, but here you can just say, hey, what is that? Okay, let's look at Python's explanation. Basically, they say that's the midterm score. It's a floating point, but we're converting to an integer, okay? Because this normal distribution will generate something as a floating point. In here, the program just assumes the score will be integer, which certainly it may not be the case in real world. And then minima just means that you generate something. I just want to make sure it's not over 100. If it's over 100, then take the minima, which means the minima will be 100. If it's more than 100, then basically I'll take whatever been generated. And so now you have that. You have a number which is less or equal to 100, but you're afraid that they may generate a negative number. Then you just say, yeah, I mean, give me the maximum number of 0 and this number. So if it's a negative, they're going to take 0 because 0 will be the bigger number, right? So this very concise expression would ensure the number that generated would be an integer, in this case, between 0 and 100. Okay, and just read through this explanation. I think everybody can kind of figure out. Okay, and so once that has been done, I even asked, like, can you draw a chart of 20 data points based on, just use the formula, okay, based on this normal distributions functions for me, and choose the best chart type and tell me why you choose it. Okay, this is actually where learning comes from. I mean, instead of just say, go ahead and do it, I'm asked actually a little bit higher level question, which means why you choose that chart type. Okay, this is important in data visualization. There's so many type of charts, chart type of chart, scatter chart, bar chart, pie chart, etc., histogram, and then which one should I use? That's the issue in data visualization, which we'll get into down the road. So, but let's just look at this one first. We'll get into the visualization very soon, but let's run the code that have actually specific student's name, okay, and also is stored into an Excel file. In this case, let's just say with name. So otherwise it will override maybe the previous file. So let's go ahead and do it. Have it done it? Okay, let's run it. Yeah, I forgot to change the message. So basically, let's just say that has been written, it's supposed to be this file name. So let's go and find that one. It should open up another. So here's the one. Okay. So this is the one that has been saved. I have student's name, the midterm final and project score, and the final grade based on the weighting and calculated and stored. Okay, so that's pretty good. Let's come back and look at the charting, which is exciting. And if you haven't done any graphics in Python, this will be your first one. Okay. Let me first run it for you so you see what's happening here. I'll explain the code a little bit. Okay. In this case, we're not using the data set we just generated. Actually, just ask ChatGPT to generate, I believe, 20 data points. Okay, using this function. And we do need to use MatplotLib, which is a powerful but commonly used graphic library in Python. But you do need to install it if you haven't been doing that. Once again, Anaconda, I think this is installed for you. We still need to use NumPy just because this is actually a NumPy function. Then they decided to use a histogram, okay, and the data, which is an array of number, and the bin in this case really means that we have 20, we divided the data set into 20 bins, okay, and then we'll try to actually count the frequency, okay, how many students are between 0 and 10, 10 and 20, okay, 20 actually it will be 5 points apart, okay, every 5-point difference is how many students fall in that range, and then we can specify the color and edge colored, etc. Okay, blue, and you can see that's the blue color. The edge, I believe, is the edge over here of the bar, and then the PL, the plot, is the object that you use in interacting with the MatplotLibs for the plotting, okay, the Python plotting object. We're creating an instance of it, and we're actually just ask them and say, do this histogram plot based on the data set with being 20 bins. The number certainly is from 0 to 100 because we, I think we know that. Well, actually, it's not. the data set is really basically a normal distribution data with mean of 20 and standard deviation of 10, but generate 20 data point. We give the we label the x-axis and y-axis. So the x-axis are the data point, and the y-axis are the frequency that occur in that beam, as we call it. Okay, so they even create a title for us. Okay, that's pretty good. I didn't even ask it to do so. Because that's standard practice, and eventually show will display it. So all of this is really setting up the chart that need to be plotted, and eventually show. It's just the final instruction and say show it to me. So that's the plotting. I do have so. Remember, I asked a question, say, choose the best chart type and tell me why you choose it. Here, they explain pretty well and say they use histogram chart. Histogram is used in this case for effective way to visualize the distribution of continuous variable. Okay, so keep that in mind when you start learning data visualization. To visualize the distribution of continuous variable, how those data points distributed in your data set. The x-axis represents the range of the data point. So we have 20 data points or more data point. Okay, and then the y-axis represents the frequency, the data point within that range, which is the beam. Okay, in histogram, in our code. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Okay, so I do have some more things I want to show you. Let's see when they're that. Okay, a few more things, then we're done. You can basically ask ChatGPT to create assignment for you based on what you have learned, and this is my instruction. Okay, and create a new Python assignment and put everything we have learned so far. So they not only create an assignment, but actually create the code. That's not what I wanted. And so, but this is pretty much part of the assignment. That's what I want. Okay. And so I kind of create another instruction. I say, can you just create assignment in plain English as detailed as possible, but do not generate a Python code. So basically, this is what they have done, which is pretty much like a typical assignment that I will give to my student. Okay, they say create a data set, contain the following information, which is pretty detailed, and write a program to calculate the final score for each student based on that. And that's pretty detailed. I like to give really detailed assignment to my students, so they don't always come back and ask me for clarification. I just say, generate some test data set, use normally distributed data with a mean of 80 and standard deviation of 10 for those score, but make sure the score is in this range. And store the data in dictionary and write the data to Excel file. I know it's a dictionary because I've seen the code previously. And by the way, you can fine-tune the assignment if you're an instructor and for your students. So instead of using this as it is, you can sort of fine-tune. And here you say create a histogram chart showing the final grade distribution. You can certainly say choose the best chart type in showing the final grades distribution. Here, just make sure students know how to calculate the final grade. You can give this formula. So that's pretty cool, okay? Another thing is that in our program student, remember student content everything that we have. So if I may come back here, and in this case, let me just say print students. Okay, that's the final outcome, students, and we want to see what that data structure looks like. Ooh, there's some arrow. Oh, I see. That has been opened, so let me just do this so that error will go away. When you open Excel and try to write the file to that opened file, it's not going to work. Yeah, so basically, this is the data structure. Okay, it looks pretty complicated. And if you're not familiar with lists, you're not familiar with dictionary, you may have trouble reading it. And that's why we can come back here and say, yeah, I mean, you have something like that. You can copy and paste and just say student equal to this, copy that information and just say, explain to me. Then they're going through, like say, student has 5 elements. Each of them is a dictionary, and dictionary has key, which is the key has name, midterm, final, project, where the value of the key associated with the respective student. Okay, this one we don't. This one is slightly different. Doesn't have that final score. So basically, they can explain this data structure for you, and then you learned along the way how. You can use dictionary and the list to store a collection of data. And so that's another way to use ChatGPT, is ask them to explain anything in Python code that you don't understand. And eventually, I can use the assignment that's generated here, and I can ask actually ChatGPT, and say, hey, this is assignment. And by the way, I strongly encourage you to ask Python to create some assignment to test what you have learned, and try to do it yourself. But eventually you can compare notes and try to see how Python solved the problem. Then you can just say, write a Python program for the following task. And basically, you can just say, you don't really need this line. You can pretty much just say, copy it over. And then the code will be generated for you. Okay. In the code that has been generated in this version of the code, they use something much more advanced, which is here. Earlier, we didn't see this. So they use something called t.t. And I have a little trouble with that, although I kind of have a hunch. Even you don't, that's fine. I said, is this for transpose, which means we're actually switching the row and column. And I just say, explain your statement in detail for me, this particular statement for me. I kind of say, is this for transpose? Okay. Then they actually say, yeah, they create from the student dictionary. This attribute is then used to transpose the data in the data frame, meaning the row and column are switched. Okay. Will be switched. Okay. And so the result data frame have the student name as a row index. Okay. If that's what you want, and the column will be midterm, final, project, and the final grade. So let's just run this code. Then we'll see what's going on here. Okay, this is very similar to what we have done already, but let's create a new Let me make it at the bottom. So we'll do this. Okay. Then we can, it's going to save to student score 2. Let me just create a new one. Then I'll say yes. Okay. So they combine actually everything, including that histogram, creating the data using normal distribution, and save it into calculate the final score, save everything into external Excel file, and then plotting the grade distribution for me. Okay, so one thing, as I mentioned, this line of code is difficult to understand. One way, at least in Jupyter Notebook, that you may want to try is this. Let's just print student, see what it looks like before the transpose function. Okay, and then hold on a second. And then let's print the data frame after the transpose, which will give you an idea what it is for. Let me comment out this saving to Excel, because otherwise you may not be able to save to an existing file, whether that's open or not. So in this case, it's not going to generate runtime error message. So let's run it. We're going to see, still have a problem. Name student not defined. I think I may have made some student, just a typo. Okay. Computer are pretty strict in terms of what you really want them to do. They're not going to second guess, oh, that typo of student is a student, so I'm going to try student. They're not as good as that. ChatGPT sometimes can tolerate a lot of your typo, but not programming language. So this is actually just a list of dictionary object. Each object is for student. And this is actually the data frame after transpose. Okay, let me do it another one. I'm going to just create a data frame before transpose. Okay, then we're going to see the data frame after transpose. I need another print statement. If you have a really good debugger, you can use the debugger function to examine a variable's value when you debug your code. So here, I'm going to print out this. I'm going to just say this is before, and comma, and this is after. This is after. So before you have actually let me do one more thing. Okay, didn't print out that nicely. I'm going to just /n, so go to a new line. That's better. Okay, so in this case, actually, you will find out before the transpose, when we use the data frame to convert that list into a data frame, we use the data frame methods in Pandas to convert a list of students' data into a data frame. This is the original list, and without transpose, we actually have Mary's midterm final and their project score and the final grade. Okay, and after transpose, we change the row, and we switch or pivot the row and column. So so each student's, like Mary's score is actually in one row. Okay, that's probably a better format. That's why they do that transpose. Okay, I guess that's it. So you learned quite a bit in this video. Basically, we learned how to generate a data set, how we can do some calculation, or how can we use random number generator, generate data set, even data set that has normal distribution. And we can learn how to use Panda library to save data into external Excel file. We also learn how to use the MatplotLib libraries plotting function, pyplot function, or object to help us to visualize some of the data that we have created. We can also ask ChatGPT to create an assignment for us based on what we have learned. And certainly you can ask them to solve the assignment problem for you, in this case in Python. Okay, so once again, this is a great learning tool. Use it as a learning tool. Don't use it to, depends on your school's policy. Check with your professor and find out whether you're allowed to use ChatGPT. And do check your school's policy. But just from a learning viewpoint, this is great. Okay. Now, as a professor, I have to struggle what kind of assignment I can give it to students to make sure they do learn their subject area. Okay, and certainly I'm not going to forbid them from use ChatGPT, because I think it's a great intelligent tutor. That's it. Thank you. Bye.